just want to say that, you know, one of the things that we've been lobbying for and advocating for, in order to have an effective entity, and I'm going to call it UN Women because that's what the name is at this time, which might change, but at this point it's being called UN Women, is that it be ambitiously funded. Because without the funding, we're just going to have another marginalized agency of the UN not being able to do everything that it's been mandated to do. And you know, so we expect this new entity funded very well so that it can take on some of those programs that we wish for it to, and also for there to be a meaningful role for civil society. And in fact, the resolution has called for that. So we expect that the civil society will play a meaningful role in working with the UN Women at both the level of the executive board, but also at the country levels and at the regional level. And we expect that the Under-Secretary General will call on civil society in an advisory capacity, and that the board will as well. And we really hope that that's going to be, you know, done in a more, not just, you know, in a
not just superficial
exactly,
way.
in a
Right,
superficial
right,
manner,
yeah.
but in a real way.
But in a real way, yes.
That's right.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Agreed. I want to draw on Charlotte's point about having a strong USG. I think that's really critical to actually moving the entity to where it can be the heights that it can be, and especially the USG's involvement with civil society, who pretty much helped to create this entity and now, you know, are integral to the success of the entity. And I think that's what can be different about UN Women, and maybe be different from the other UN agencies at this point, is sort of, you know, taking on this new role within the UN and saying, you know, we have a responsibility to achieve here, and this is how we can achieve it through better involvement of civil society organizations, through better coordination throughout the UN system of all UN agencies, and just understanding how women's rights, gender equality is integral to all the work that the UN does. And it's really important that, you know, UN Women does achieve that goal and kind of becomes this model for the UN in the of the future, I guess, the UN of the future.
Wonderful. You know, this process has been revolutionary. The passage of this resolution has been revolutionary. And the GEAR campaign has done such a fabulous job. Where do you see the GEAR campaign going from here? Rachel, what do you think?
Well, I think from here, the GEAR campaign essentially is a voice for civil society. Throughout this process, the GEAR campaign has really, as everyone has said, unified civil society and really in a strategic way. And at this point, I think the GEAR campaign can still do that throughout with UN Women, and work with UN Women, and work to bring more civil society organizations into the campaign, as well as disseminate information to civil society organizations on the ground, who will now start to work more with UN Women in the future.
Great. Well, I'm hoping that we'll be working closely with the Under-Secretary General and also the other senior staff at the UN, and even before that, with the transition team that she puts together, to make the entity really come into force, to help them, well, and we'll offer whatever assistance we can from civil society perspective, to talk about what we're hearing from NGOs that are working on the ground for advancement of women and women's rights, to you know, to try and bring their voice to their decision-making process, so that as they set about creating this entity and making it, breathing life into it, that it has the input from civil society, from the ground. So I think that's the immediate you know, future of the GEAR campaign. And we'd like to see a very successful, strong UN Women for the future. But I don't think, at least I personally don't see the campaign going on endlessly. We really want to, you know, see this going on in the near future, and then we'll reassess at that point, I would think.
Yes, I agree with that, and I think that one of the most important messages that we want to send out from all of us in the GEAR campaign is that now is the time for all the NGOs who are interested in women's equality to get involved. Now is the time for NGOs at the national level to contact their resident coordinator and the head of the UN country team to talk to UNIFEM or UNFPA or whoever they talk to on the ground about how this will work. It's not, we can't create it only from the headquarters. This has to be created from the ground up, and that means that NGOs need to be going to talk to people in the UN, getting themselves organized. It requires doing some of what we did in the GEAR campaign at the international level, of having women's organizations working with women's rights advocates in other NGO and civil society groups, and being able to present more of, it's not that everyone has to agree on everything, but being able to present a stronger, more coordinated voice about what we want the UN to be doing at the national and the regional level, as we will be trying to do in our conversations here in New York with the USG, assuming we have those meetings that Bani just called for, and I think we should. But that same effort should be happening everywhere, and I don't think that we want people to feel they have to wait to hear from us to do that. Our message is, this is now for all the NGOs, all the civil society to become engaged. And whatever issue you're working on, this is the opportunity to think, what should UN Women, as a new, more powerful women's agency, do and be able to do? What could it be able to do to help advance implementation of 1325, to help it advance the efforts to achieve the MDGs and to end poverty for women? What should it be doing on violence against women? Whatever issue you work on, you can now think about how to bring this resource more effectively into that work.
Thank you so much. Now, in closing, I'd like to get at least a minute from each of you on what you think the impact of this 21st century entity would be in a world that we all know largely operates and is dominated by 20th century modes of organization and governance. Rachel, would you like to give it a shot?
Well, as I said before, I think this new entity really represents a new way of thinking about how to go about really implementing some of these policies that have been out there for years, but haven't really gone as far as implementation on the ground. I think this new entity gives space for creativity in achieving those policies, and can really become more of a model for other UN agencies to really fall behind and say, this is the way of doing things in the 21st century. And this is how, you get things done in the 21st century, actually. So I think, I have a lot of optimism that this new UN agency can actually, push the envelope and really achieve things that haven't been achieved in the past because of its the room for it to grow and become a model.
That's very exciting. Thank you.